Hello everyone, today I want to talk about drawing teeth. For my illustrations I noticed it has had quite the impact on how the characters look, and I think it gives their appearance a certain bite. Personally, I started paying attention to teeth for my illustrations only a while ago, but ever since I did that, I really enjoyed giving my characters nicely detailed teeth. So I want to give you an insight into the way I draw them. As always, there are of course multiple different ways that you can draw teeth. Varying the amount of details, for example. From crosses to a single line to perfectly rendered teeth. The possibilities are plenty. Depending on style and occasion, there are of course certain situations where different methods make more sense than others. Comics might not call for the amount of effort to give every character full elaborate teeth for each panel. But regardless of style though, if we want to draw it, it's always helpful to get an overview of what we are dealing with. With adult characters, typically there are 16 teeth, 8 on each side if we were to divide both jaws in the middle. My model here is missing the last molars on each side though, but whether you work with 8 or 7 teeth is not that important. Overall, the last molars are rarely visible in the final drawing. But still, we want to memorize a rough image of what the jaws and teeth look like and where they are located if we draw them. With both the upper and lower jaw, we have 4 incisors, the 4 sharp teeth at the front that are used to cut the food. Then there are 2 canines, which are the pointy ones that are next to the incisors. You will find them pretty prominently in hands with vampires and more animalistic characters. Next are the 4 premolars, 2 on each side that have this ridge in the middle. And lastly, there are overall 6 molars that are used to grind the food. Another thing to keep in mind is that the upper jaw is attached to the skull itself, and therefore it doesn't move when we open and close the mouth. It is only the lower jaw that does that. For us that means that the teeth of the upper jaw will always be parallel to the eyes. The lower jaw is more flexible with the angle, depending on how open the mouth is. But as it is attached to the upper jaw, at least the joints of the lower jaw are also parallel with the eyes. This will become important later. Having a rough image of the structure now, let's make some use of it. I want to create a map that I can use to correctly localize and construct each tooth. In Clip Studio, I use the symmetric ruler first. I create a new layer and add a vertical guideline with it. Then I draw a parabolic curve, which using the symmetric ruler should be pretty easy. After that, one by one, I add the teeth on one side of my curve. First the 2 incisors, then 1 canine. The tool mirrors that for the other side. Next come the molars, which have a flat surface compared to the sharp teeth that we have drawn before. So I draw a little X on each molar. How big you make each tooth is also kind of depending on personal taste and proportions. Play around and don't be afraid to erase a tooth and redraw it if it looks off. Usually you can tell if something looks wrong. But if you are still feeling insecure about the proportions, I definitely recommend checking references for this. You can find plenty examples on Google, and I will also link my version down below. It might not look like it, but this diagram will serve as a map that helps us to draw the teeth from a lot of different angles. Creating this map for the lower jaw is quite similar. We start by using the symmetric ruler and drawing a parabolic curve again. Only the incisors and canines now are a bit more narrow, making the curve a tiny amount pointier towards the center compared to the first one. Then we add the teeth again. One by one, the amount and structure is the same as before. Mark the molars with an X again, and with a little bit of cleanup, we are done with our 2 guides. Now let's give them a try for the front view. Here I prepared a drawing of a head, and I will start with sketching the upper jaw. I copy and paste the map of my upper jaw on my drawing and adjust the size so it matches with my character. I try to have the width of the map around the distance of both the irises. Now I mark the interdental spaces, only the ones though that would be hit by an imaginary light source. So all those spots between the teeth that are on the outside of the curve. Creating a layer with the symmetric ruler again, I now draw a slightly concave symmetric curve on my character's head, just like adding a smile. Depending on the angle of the head, the curve becomes more bent. If the character looks down, for example, the curve is also bent down. And if the character looks up, the curve is bent up. For my head, I use this curve as another guide that I can sketch my teeth along. Then on a new layer, we use the parallel ruler to draw lines going down from these marked spots. I draw a straight line from the incisors of my map all the way down, and I repeat this with the other teeth. The gap between each line serves us as a guide for the width of that specific tooth, also including the effect of overlapping. To help us not to mix up these spaces, we can use different colors and fill the gaps between the lines that are representing each tooth. This is optional, but I wanted to include this step so it's easier to follow what's going on. Now we can use these stripes of color to draw out front teeth. Following the width of each field, I draw bows, starting from the center and working my way to the sides. This way I create the gum. The canines have a pointy tip, so I draw a sharp edge on the green area. Depending on the character, you can exaggerate their features or keep them normal. For the incisors and molars, I close these bows with a flat curve for the tip. So the front teeth end up with a shape kind of looking like a fingernail, and the molars look like the other teeth are overlapping them. The last step is cleaning things up, erasing any guides and polishing the shape of the teeth. Now we are done with the upper jaw, and we have created a front view of the teeth in proportion to our map. The lower jaw is a bit more complicated. As we slightly look top down on the head, we will have to consider that with an open mouth we will be able to see the surface of the molars. First we copy and paste the map on top of our drawing again and adjust the size in a way it fits between the irises of the character, just like before. Then I mark the interdental spaces again that lie on the outside of the curve. Now I switch to the parallel ruler and draw lines going down from these interdental spaces. I add colors again, which as I said is optional, but it serves for better attributing each gap to the according tooth. Now though we will have to do something different. As we need to pay attention to the surfaces of the molar, I add a new layer. On it, I create a selection of the map by selecting the surroundings of the map and inverting it, so I can fill it with a flat color. Then I set the layer to multiply, and with the transform function, I bend it according to the upper jaw and how far I want the mouth to be open. Of that shape, I only traced the molars, and this way I end up with about the right shapes for the surfaces that I need. As the surfaces of the incisors and canines are pretty sharp, I can use the outer line of the map selection and estimate the width of each tooth with the help of my colored lines. Lastly, some final adjustments and cleaning, and we are done with the lower jaw. Now that we have created both rows of teeth, all that's left to do is to draw the mouth and do some final adjustments so everything fits together. I chose to give him an evil grin, a bit asymmetric to make it look more natural, but needless to say, you can go with whatever expression you need. The teeth inside will always stay the same. As examples, I tried some different shapes here, just so you can see that these teeth are basically reusable for this perspective with any mouth shape. But it can still happen that they turn out to be too big or too small. If that's the case, we can use the transform tool to stretch and resize them to our liking. That is also true if we only need to change a single jaw, of course. You also don't necessarily need to have a drawing of your character to draw the teeth on them. But you can freestyle this method to just draw a bunch of teeth as stock that you can later adjust and customize according to your needs and character. Now, what can we do if the character is looking at us from another angle? Let's have a look at how we use this method for the 3/4 view. To draw the jaws from a 3/4 perspective, the steps we have seen so far in essence aren't as different as before, but still overall it is a bit trickier. Beginning with the upper jaw, I copy and paste the same map from before on top of my character. I slightly rotate the teeth, so the incisors are leaning to the same direction that the head is facing towards. In regards to the size of the map, it is not as simple as with the front view, where we could rely on the eye distance as orientation. Still, I try to keep the map around the size of the eye distance, but instead of using the center, I'm using the corner of the eyes as a rough estimate. It is a bit tricky, but we can still do the adjustments in the end, in case the teeth turn out to be too big or too small. So I wouldn't worry about that too much at the moment. Again, I mark the interdental spaces and draw lines starting from these spots, using the parallel ruler. Notice that, unlike before, the resulting lines aren't mirrored in the middle this time, but have their focus on the left side, as the lines there get narrower. Now I rotate the layers so these parallel lines roughly match the angle of the character's face. For better orientation, I fill these lines with different colors for the corresponding teeth again. Just like we did with the front view, with the 3/4 angle, we also have to consider the perspective of the head. The character has the head lifted a bit to look down at us, so this time we can assume that we will be able to see the surface of the molars of the upper jaw too. So I create a new layer and add a selection of the map to fill it with a flat color. Then I set the layer to multiply so that I can use it again as a guide to draw the surface of the molars. Next I need to transform that selection a bit more this time and bend it according to how I think it would fit inside the skull of the drawing. The way we transform the selection will determine the perspective of our teeth. This part is kind of the hardest of the process because you will need some knowledge on how the jaw is working. Due to the perspective, having the teeth curved parallel to the eyes isn't really working. Rather, we want the last molars of each side to be on a line parallel to the eyes. Considering that, at least as a rule of thumb, we can try to align our selection with the eyes. Once we have everything set, we can draw the teeth. I start by tracing the surfaces of the molars from my selection. And then I can use the parallel lines again to estimate how wide the teeth are. I add curves for the gums and again I give the canines a pointy tip. After that it's just a bit of cleaning up and we are done with the upper jaw and can focus on the lower jaw. Constructing the lower jaw though is similarly tricky. We can use the same steps as before. Place the map of the lower jaw on your character to estimate the size, using the eyes for rough measurements. Then slightly rotate it so the incisors are showing in the direction the character is facing towards. Mark the interdental spots to draw the parallel lines and color them if you need to. Then align the construction with the face. Because I want to draw the mouth wide open, we will also see the molar surfaces of the lower jaw. So, like with the upper jaw, I create a selection of the map and fill it with a flat color on a new layer set to multiply. Transforming this one this time though is tricky again. As the mouth is supposed to be wide open, the curve of the teeth isn't parallel to the eyes, so again we can't easily use that as an orientation. But the fact that the lower jaw is somewhat attached to the upper jaw means that the last molars on the map again will have to form a line parallel to the eyes. From there, we can figure out the rest by stretching the selection using the upper jaw as a guide for the perspective. Then I trace the molar surfaces using the flat color map as a reference again. I use the colored lines to figure out the width of each tooth and add pointy tips to the canines and flat tips for the incisors. Lastly, it's time to clean up the sketch again, erasing and redrawing lines, also paying attention to the overlapping. And we are done with the teeth. This time I chose a friendly expression for the mouth shape. But of course we can now use any expression for the mouth as the teeth always stay the same. Just as with the front view, it's still very likely that we'll need to adjust the size of the jaws or stretch the shape to have it really fit together with the face. Admittedly, this method might seem a bit overkill. After all, we are only drawing teeth. There are probably quicker and easier ways to draw teeth, especially if you have already some experience with drawing. And I wouldn't go through the whole process every single time I draw a character, to be honest. But I wanted to explain it so everyone can follow this for their own art, regardless of artistic background. And also, once you have drawn the teeth, you can reuse them for multiple expressions, and for different perspectives, maybe even build a little library of teeth. Anyway, that's it for today. If you like my art and want to see more of it, I'm also on Instagram and Twitter. The username is always Lauvan, but you can find the links in the description too. If you have any tips you would like to add or even want me to address in a future video, feel free to share them in the comments. Likes are always appreciated as well. Thank you so much for watching and until the next time.